Welcome back to Tanya in 5. Today, we recap Chapter 10 of Book 2 in Tanya. In Chapter 9, the Alter Rebbe explained that the divine essence transcends any definition, even a definition in the negative sense. Namely, one cannot say, God is too great for me to understand, because that too is a definition of God being an intellectual being, whereas the whole notion of intellect is only that which emerges from him, but does not in any way define him. Then he concluded by saying that nonetheless, we believe with complete faith that God is absolutely one with all that emanates from him. His kindness, his wisdom, his understanding, his compassion, his judgment, all these attributes that emanate from him are absolutely and totally one with him. In Chapter 10, the Alter Rebbe gives us some visual on what this oneness looks like, the oneness between God's essence and those attributes that emanate from him. The Kabbalists use the term ma'or, which means luminary or source of light, and or, light. Light can only be called light once it exits the source, once it exits the luminary. When the light emerges from the light bulb, now I refer to it as light. Now within the source, within the flame, within the sun, within the source of light in the light bulb, there certainly is light there. But the light there is not an independent being that can be called light. It is nothing other than its source. Now, the Rebbe explains that this is not to be understood as was understood in an early chapter, in Chapter 3, where there we discussed the idea that all of creation is within the divine energy that creates it. And there the conclusion was that all that exists is absolutely nothingness because it's within the divine source that creates it. Here, it is not correct to say that the divine attributes are absolutely nothing. They certainly exist. But they aren't independent. They are nothing other than their source. So divine wisdom exists, but divine wisdom is nothing other than the divine itself. There is certainly divine kindness, but divine kindness is nothing other than the divine itself. As opposed to my experience of wisdom and kindness, there's me and my wisdom. There's me and my kindness. For God, his wisdom and kindness exist, but they are like the light that is inside its source, in that it has no independent name or title. It is nothing other than the source itself. It is only when these divine attributes begin to operate, create, and control our world, or even the spiritual worlds, here we start to see the division between one attribute, another attribute, and how each attribute interplays with the other. Kindness interplays with restraint, and vice versa, and all of it express divine intelligence and divine desire. But that is only from the perspective of how these attributes operate within the worlds and how they affect the worlds. But from God's perspective, all of these attributes certainly exist, but they are nothing other than him. Now, as mentioned in Chapter 9, it's almost impossible to fully understand this, because for us, all oneness is comprised. There's me, my wisdom, my kindness, my judgment, and so on and so forth. But nonetheless, at least now we have some visual in using this metaphor of light while it's in its source, the source of light, the ma'or. Now the takeaway from all of this is, there's one way in which we can connect to God, by which we abandon our reality and say, all of this is nothingness. It's all nothing to God, and therefore no reason for me to be afraid, no reason for me to worry. It's all God. This relationship kind of abandons our experience. Then there's another oneness with God, in which we take all the things we experience and attach it and attribute it to God. Not that we abandon our experiences and say, we don't care because it's all God. But we take all the things we experience and attach it and attribute it to God. Because at the end of the day, He and all of His attributes with which He interacts with us is nothing other than Him. And they're all one. Looking forward to seeing you when we conclude chapter 11.